and grow.
Testing is something, let's suppose we have built a system, or we have built anything. Let's suppose we have a car, right? So whenever we build a car, or whenever we built a software application, there are chances that it can be non-functioning, or there are some areas which is not performing as per the user need, right? So there comes in picture the concept of testing. So let's suppose you have a car, right? You own a car, and there is a button called start button, right? So let's suppose you got your car, and when you are clicking on a software start button of your car is not starting, right? So how to ensure that whatever the product you are getting as a client, or as a business person, or as an end user, it's bug free, or it's performing as per your expectation. So there are a lot of functionalities and modules in your car, or in your any application or anything, that we have to test it probably, or we have to find the bugs, so that whenever it's going to the users, it's going to be perfect for use, right? So if your car has been done with the testing, then your start button must be working, right? So testing, it comes in a picture to deliver a product which is bug free, or which is an error free, and it's uh, usable for you, or you can use as per the promised, like like I told you the example of car. So if you have in your car, you have a start button, right? And if you're pressing the start button, it's not going to start, and that means that car has not been quality tested. Okay. So take any example. So I'm talking about the car. We have a software application. Let's suppose we have, so you all must be using Facebook, right? So let's suppose we have so you open your Facebook, and whenever you click on logout button, right, your Facebook account is not getting logged out. So that is something which is not expected, right? So before using Facebook, it should be properly tested. Like whenever you are clicking on a logout button, it should log out your session out of Facebook account, right? So there are many situations can be there, like you're using a Gmail account, right? Whenever you click on a compose button, so uh, ideally, so it should be opening a new window for composing a new mail with a two button CC button, and there would be an area where you're going to write your email. There is a attachment button, then there is a send button, right? So let's suppose your Gmail has not been tested with a high precision, right? So whenever you click on compose button, it's going to log out your system, right? So that is something where software testing comes in a picture. So whenever we build any system, whenever we build any product, it should be passed with the like high precision software testing or high precision testing, so that whenever you are getting the product, whenever any user is getting the product, it should be expected, so as expected as per promise. Like so Google has like launched their Gmail email client, right? So whenever you are using email, you are able to perform all the functions which you are expecting, right? So let's suppose you want to send an email, so you are able to do that, right? So this is something called software testing, or simple testing for all the products. So in case of software application, we call it software testing, right? So okay, so let's first understand what is like software life cycle. So whenever we are building any software, right? So we follow certain phases. So we have a certain phases in software testing and software development as well. So first we'll try to understand what is software develop. So for building a software, we have certain phases which we call as software development life cycle, right? So any question till now to anybody? Hamza, Rani, Khushi, Zubair, any question?
Nope.
Okay, that's really great. So, so whenever we build a software, we have to pass through a certain phases. So the first phase is called as requirement gathering and analysis, right? So what is requirement gathering? So it's a pretty much clear with the naming convention is well, requirement gathering. So whenever we are given a task to build some software application, let's suppose uh, I got a software to build some application called airline ticketing system, right? So let's suppose I'm getting a so somebody from the team. Let's suppose Kushi told me to build a aviation system or air ticket reservation system. So so Kushi will be giving me a requirement booklet, a requirement document that is going to state all the requirements which Kushi want me to implement as part of my air ticket reservation system. So it will contain all the modules, it will contain all the functionalities, what functionalities she wants me to build. Like she's going to ask me to build a login page first, then there would be a page called where you can select your journey origin, and where you can select your end journey, where you want to end the journey. Then there would be a date, then there would be a class called economy business class, then there would be a button to select all the seats, right? So there would be a requirement document. So that is Khushi is going to hand over it to me, right? So that is called as requirement gathering and analysis phase, where we analyze the requirement to understand what Khushi wants or what Swati wants, right? So then there comes a phase called design, right? So design is a phase where we build a system blueprint, like how we are going to implement the requirement which we have got, how we are going to implement that requirement to build our system, right? So design phase contains like we are going to select the product, or select the tool which we are going to use as part of development, right? We are going to uh, divide the requirement in different modules, that what modules we are going to have. Like first module I'm going to name as a login window. The second module I'm going to name as a reservation page, where we are going to select the destination, and we are going to select the origin. Then other options are there. Then we are going to divide a module called as a payment system, where we are going to make the payment, right? So design is a phase where we create the modules of your software, how you are going to implement this application, or how you are going to implement your software, right? Then we have a phase called implementation and coding, or coding. So implementation basically whenever the developers are actually going to code to build the system as per the design they have created, right? So like so based on the tool they have selected, or based on the language they have selected in design phase, they are going to implement using that design, right? Then there's a phase called testing, right? So that is what we are going to understand about complete testing process, right? So I'll be covering the so the, in for testing as well, we have a life cycle which we called as software test life cycle, right? So it also has certain phases, and we'll be covering it in a couple of minutes. Then we have a deployment. So deployment is like whenever you have written a code in your local system. Let's suppose you are using your local system, right, to write the code. So you can consider a Word document which you have. So you open a Word document, you write something, right? So still it's in your local system, but you want your Word document to be seen by everybody, right? So let's suppose I want to share a document among the group, among the everybody who is in the presentation or in the group, right? So I'll be uploading this document to somewhere, right? So there is a screen share concept as well, but don't make it this much complicated. So you want to upload your Word document as well. So you are going to upload it somewhere. Maybe you are going to send an email, or you are going to upload on Dropbox, or you are going to upload it on SharePoint, right? So that is called deployment. So developers, what they do, so there is a code in their local system, they deploy it to some repository, right? From there they are going to compile the code, and everybody can see it. Let's suppose I have a a code in my system. I'm going to upload it to some repository. So there are multiple repositories available in the market, or there are multiple open source repositories as well. So where we can upload the code, and then we can execute the code from there, right? Then we have a phase called maintenance. So maintenance is nothing but whenever your application is ready for use, uh, it is there to handle the runtime bugs if any comes, right? So let's suppose you are using some software application. So I'll be giving an example of Microsoft Windows. So you all must be using Microsoft Windows or Mac Pro in your system, right? So so there are a lot of bugs which are still unfixed. So as part of maintenance phase, people are going to fix, or Microsoft people or Apple people are going to fix that bug, right? So this is the software development life cycle. So any question, query from anybody?
Abhishek, could you explain the difference between deployment and maintenance again?
Sure. So
Thank you.
deployment is basically when, so let's suppose I have a code in my local system. So local system means it's not connected to network, right? I'm going to write some code in my local system in my laptop, right? Now if you want to see, if you want to build this application, then you need to upload it somewhere, right? So
Yeah, right.
let's suppose I'm going to, so there is a something called Git repository. So Git repository is a uh, it's an repository where we store the code, and from there we move it to the production. So production is an environment where you can send your code, and there from there your end user or your business can see your application, right? So that
Okay,
is a deployment.
so
Mhm.
even the end user, that means even clients can see the code and everything, right? In deployment.
Right, right. So after
Okay,
deployment, your code is visible to end user,
okay,
right? So it
right.
deployment is a process where we make our application live. So you must be understanding with live, like anybody can see. So end user can see the application, or your business can see the application, or anybody can see the application, right? So I'll be covering
Okay,
deployment. So deployment is basically whenever we make our application live. So whether it can be any environment where QA, or where it can be a production environment. So I'll be covering these things in later classes. So as this is an introductory class, I'm going to cover the basics of software testing.
okay. Sure.
So that's fine. So anybody do you have any questions? So anybody, Alex, Aswari, Ashish, Aziza, Charu, Divya, Hamza.
Okay, with everything that you just went over, will we be doing this at a job, or is this just a basic training that you're giving us?
So Alex, this is going to be a this is going to be a training which is going to give you a complete overview of software testing that will help you to get the job, right? So I'm not a QA trainer here. I'm a QA mentor here. So I'm going to help you till you get a job, right? So this is a basic introduction class, and that's why I'm covering the basics of software testing as of now.
Okay, okay, no
Okay.
problem. So far, so good.
Okay. So thanks, Alex. Okay. So moving to next. So as I mentioned that for testing as well, we have a complete testing life cycle, which to perform testing, we have a life cycle which we need to implement, or which we need to follow, right? So in software testing life cycle, again, we have a 5 phases, or okay, 5 phases. Like, so first is the requirement analysis. Okay, so requirement analysis is something which is similar to development. So whatever requirement a developer team is going to get, we as a tester also get the same requirement. So developers get the requirement to build, like to understand the requirement from the view of developer, right? But we get the requirement from the perspective that we need to break the software. So whenever we get the requirement, we have to understand the application well, right? So for example, being a tester, I should know each and every functionality of your application, right? let's suppose I'm going to test your Facebook, so I should be aware about each and every functionality, like how to upload the photographs, how to share the location, how to comment, how to like, and how to share your post, right? So as a like tester, I should be aware of each and every concept of your application, right? So the purpose of requirement analysis is to understand the requirement, to understand the application which is going to be built. Then we have a phase called test planning, right? So test planning is something where so in test planning we prepare a document called test plan, right? So test plan is a document which contains each and every detail about your testing process. So it's basically a Word document, and test plan contains like all the details about your testing. Let's suppose I have an application called air ticket reservation. It's going to complete all the information which is going to be done as part of a testing of that application. So it's going to contain your uh, all the tester details, that who is the quality assurance team which is going to test the application, what are the modules which are going to be tested, then what are the techniques we are going to use for software testing. So for testing we have a lot of techniques which we are going to cover in later classes, right? So it is fully fledged document that is going to give an overview of complete testing process, that who is the tester, what are the modules which are being tested, what is the methodology, or what is the way of testing, or what is the form of testing we are going to use to test the application, what are the modules, and what are the testing tools which we are going to use. So test planning is nothing but it's a document which contains all your information about the testing of current application, right? Then we have a test case development. So anybody can so test case is basically a set of condition which is going to test your application, right? So let's suppose I need to test one application. So let's suppose I need to test Facebook, right? So how will you start the testing process? So you can say that without any document we can start the testing process, but that is again not going to help you, because if you're not going to document your testing process, you may miss a lot of modules which are being tested, right? So for testing purpose we create a test case. So test case is nothing but a set of conditions or set of instructions which we execute on the application, right? So for example, so let's suppose I'll be taking an example of Facebook, because Facebook is something which most of the people must be using, so you must be aware about the functionality of Facebook, right? So let's suppose my manager has given me a task to write a test case for login application of your Facebook application, right? So my test case would be something like, it would be having a serial number. So I'm going to mention it 1. Then there would be something called steps, or okay, so there would be something called a description about your test case. So I'll be writing as a login to Facebook app functionality, right? Then there would be something called test steps. So test step is something which is like how you are going to execute this test case. Like, so for login application, what would be your steps? So your steps, something would be like, first point is you are going to open your browser. Second point is you are going to write www.facebook.com to your browser window or URL bar. The third point would be you have to enter the username. Then fourth step would be you are going to enter the password. Then fifth step would be you are going to enter login button, right? So this is something called as steps in your test case, right? So then there would be a next column called expected results, like, right? So for each and every step we are going to have a expected result. So it's a result which we are going, so ideally it's a result which we are going to expect as per the requirement which we get, right? So let's suppose in requirement they have mentioned like we have to build some application called Facebook where we are going to have a login button, and in login button we are going to enter all the details and it should be logged in, right? So based on this requirement thing, we are going to write the expected result. Like for first option, for first step, like first step was open a browser window, so there would be a expected result for that one, that will state like you should be able to get the browser window, right? Then second step is like write www.facebook.com to your URL in your in your browser, right? Then the expected result of this would be something called like you should be able to see homepage of your Facebook window, Facebook application, right? Then again there's a third step called enter username, right? So there would be a step, so the expected result of this step can be you should be able to enter the username without any error, right? Then the fifth step like enter the password. So the expected result would be something called enter the you should be able to enter the password without any issue, right? Then so I can write these steps for you. So in test case we are going to have different columns. So first would be serial number, right? Second can be functionality. Then third can be your test steps. Then fourth can be your expected results. Then fifth can be your actual results. Okay. Then sixth can be your what we say, it's you can say outcome of your test, right? So outcome can be pass or fail. Then there was something called remarks, right? So serial number, I already explained you that serial number is going to be your numbering system. Then functionality to be tested, right? So it can be something like I'm going to write Facebook login functionality. Okay, so test steps is basically what I explained. So let's suppose for Facebook login functionality, I'm going to write the test case as I mentioned. Like I'll be writing a first test at open a browser. Second step is like enter www.facebook.com to your URL. Then third step is like enter the username. Fourth step is like you enter the password. Then click login button. So these are the test steps. So expected results are basically based on your requirement. Like your requirement states that whenever you click on whenever you open a Facebook, so you should be able to see a login button and you should enter username, password, and you should be able to log in the Facebook, right? So these are the expected results. So actual results are the results which you are getting while testing your application, right? So let's suppose you have prepared your test case with expected result. Now there is something called execution where we are going to execute our test case step based on the test steps, right? So there we write the actual results. So actual results are nothing but it's a self-explanatory, like it's the actual testing results which we are going to get once our application is ready and we are actually testing the application, right? So that's the actual results. Like let's suppose I'm opening a browser and the browser is getting open, right? But whenever I'm going to type www.facebook.com, I'm not able to see the login window, right? So there we can write I'm not able to see the login button. I'm not able to see the login page. So that is actual result. Now outcome. So outcome is something, it's called a result. Whenever your expected result and actual results are not matching, we say your test case is failing. or if they're matching, we say it's a test case is like passing, right? So outcome is basically it's a result of your test case execution. Then we have something called remarks. So remarks is nothing but if you want to have some comment based on your finding. Let's suppose you know that why the test cases are failing. So you simply mention that maybe deployment is not done correctly. So that's why. So it's basically a complete optional column where you can mention something which you feel should a developer know, or just for information purpose. So this is a test case, basic test case column. So this may be or may not be common across the industry, because there are some companies who are using their own like test case columns, right? So this is a general test case column which we should be having for a complete, understandable test case, right? So this is called test case. So we create the test cases as part of test case development phase, right? Now we have something called environment setup phase. So environment setup phase is basically we prepare our environment. So environment setup is basically done by the development team, but so we have to ensure that environment is completely set up. So we do a lot of basic testing that is called as smoke testing or some other form of testing. So I'll be covering these more detailed answers for these, like what is smoke testing, what is sanity testing in further classes, right? So environment setup is basically we ensure that the environment on which I'm going to perform the testing is doing well, or it's up, or we can access the application, right? So that comes under the part of environment setup. When we have a phase called test execution. So test execution is nothing but when we execute all the test cases which we have written as part of test case development phase, right? So test execution is executing all your test cases which we have written. So you can have a multiple. So ideally for any application, we are going to have a lot of test cases based on the module. So we'll be covering these things in a very detailed manner in further classes, right? Then we have a last step called test cycle closure. So test cycle closure is a phase where we decide to stop the testing of your application. Okay, so for testing cycle closure, we have certain requirements which are supposed to meet. Like, let's suppose I have written 1,000 test cases for application. Then, as part of test cycle closure, we have a prerequisite condition like at least you should be able to execute 950 test cases. Okay, and let's suppose you have created 100 bugs after executing these 950 test cases. Then there can be a prerequisite requirement, right? You should be able to a developer should be able to fix 80 bugs, right? So that is something called test cycle closure. So a lot of documents are associated with test cycle closure. So the document can be like a document which is going to state that what's the passing percentage of test cases, what's the stability of your application. So a lot of documents are associated with that. So I'll be covering that in some other class, right? So these are the like 6 steps which we have as a part of software test life cycle. So in further classes, we are going to emphasize more on the software test life cycle phase, like what is test planning, how we do the test planning, okay, and who do the test planning. Then how to write the test cases. So for writing the test cases, we have different ways to write the test cases, right? Like there is something called decision maker table. There is something called equivalence class. Then there's something called so a lot of methodologies are there to write your test cases. So like environment setup is a very self-explanatory, and then we have a test execution, right? So test execution is like executing your test cases on the application, and test cycle closure, right? So that is a test life cycle. So have you guys have any question, any query? Okay, so I'll take it as no. So now coming back to the PPT. So these are the topics I'm supposed to be covered. So I think what is software testing, definition of software testing, why do we test a software, what are errors, faults, and failures, then principles of software testing, then fundamental test process, right? So these are the things which I have already explained you, but I'll be going through the PPT to see if anything is missed or not. So as I already mentioned that what is software testing? So software testing is an activity in a software development. It is an investigation performed against a software to provide information about the quality of software to stakeholders, right? So it's the same which I told you, like whenever we get an application after development, right? So before sending it to the stakeholders, we have to ensure that it's working as per the requirement, or it's working as per the functionality which is supposed to be worked, right? So like first point is like to ensure that the software meets the agreed requirement and design. So that's absolutely what I told you, because you have to build an application as per the requirement, and that is a task of software tester to ensure that you have built it as per the requirement. Then we have a application works as expected, right? So this is something which we say, so it should be working as expected by the as per the requirement, right? Then the application does not contain serious bugs. So it's like whenever you are testing your application, it should not be having any serious issue, functionality issue, right? So there they have mentioned a bug. So what is bug? So bug is nothing. Whenever we find any issue with your software application, we call it as a bug. Let's suppose I am going to test the application Facebook. So whenever I am going to click on a home button, I'm able to log out, right? So it's a bug. So we are going to raise this bug to developer. So bug is nothing. Whenever you find any issue with your application, you are going to notify this thing to developers or the stakeholders. So how we notify? By creating a bug. So bug is a way to like bug is a documented part of issue which you are getting in your application. So bug has a complete life cycle, that how bug is going to travel towards the like developer. Like whenever we create a bug, we are going to have we are going to have a status called new. So I'll be covering these things in later sessions. Then we have a meets its intent as you use as per user expectation. So it's again the same thing, that we should be able to build the application which is expected from the end user or stakeholders. Then these are the standards of software testing definitions which are provided by some of the great person in this industry. Like we have Hetzel 1973, and he's stating that testing is a process of establishing confidence that a program or system does what it is supposed to, right? So that's exactly. So if you're building your application, so you are you have to ensure that it's up to the mark, or it's the application which is expected by the stakeholders. So that's what is testing all about, right? So we have certain other definitions as well, like Evans et al. 1996 stated that testing is demonstrating that a system is fit to for purpose, right? So it's again the same thing, like for whatever intended purpose you are building the system, it should work the way, right? So these are the self-explanatory definitions, so you can go through it. So you must have these PPTs uploaded in your student portal. So why do we test software? So it's exactly the same thing which I told you, that we test the software to ensure that this software is going to perform as per the expectations from the stakeholders, right? So that's the sole purpose of performing the testing process on any software application, right? So you can go through the slide and just let me know if you have any doubt, issue, or question. So we are going to cover this PPT in next 10 minutes, and then window is open for you to ask the questions, right? So here we have what are errors, fault, and failure, right? So as I told you, we have a bug. So whenever we found any issue with the application, right? So name it as a bug. So bug is like further categorized into three things like error, fault, and failure, right? So error is something which is like going to, so let's suppose uh, so error is something which is not going to give your application like you are not able to use the application as per the expectation, right? So that is something called as error. So let's suppose as I mentioned that whenever you have a Facebook application open, you click on a home button and you are getting logged out of your system, right? So this is not expected, right? Whenever you click on a home button, the like your home page should be visible on the Facebook, but if it's logging it out, then that means it's an error in your application, right? Then fault. So fault is the, you can say fault is the input of error. So whenever we are going to have a faulty code or any faulty configuration, it's going to give you an error, right? So that is something called as fault. Then we have a failure. So when there is a failure in your application, complete failure, that can be because of error, and error is going to again because of fault. So that is something called as a failure. So in the hierarchy, if you see, first is a fault. You make a fault in your application, right? Then you are going to get an error. So error can be at the module level, right? So let's suppose I have written something called some bad code, and whenever I'm going to click on the home page button of your Facebook application, I'm going to log out. So here the fault is the code which you have written. It's a incorrect code, right? Then because of this incorrect code, I'm going to have an error in my application, right? So the error is whenever you are clicking on a home page button, it's going to log you out from the system, right? So because of this error, your Facebook application is failure. Like you are not able to perform the action, you are not able to use the application as per the expectation, right? So that is called as failure. Then we have principles of software testing. So these are the principles of software testing, or you can say these are the like some unwritten rules which we follow while performing the software testing, right? So the first principle is testing shows the presence of bug, right? So that's pretty much understandable. Like whenever you are going to perform a testing on your application, you are going to get a bug, right? So it shows that the system is going to have a lot of bugs, right? So that is called testing shows the presence of bugs. Then we have a next principle called exhaustive testing is impossible. So exhaustive is like uncontrollable, right? So as per this principle, you cannot perform a complete, so like you cannot cover each and everything in your application as part of software testing, right? There are some modules which cannot be tested. So exhaustive testing, you cannot test each and everything. So if I need to tell one liner that exhaustive testing is not possible, is impossible, so I'll be simply in one liner I'll be mentioning that you cannot perform the testing of each and everything in your application, right? So that's why we have a phases called test case development, where we are going to write the test cases based on the functionality or based on the module, right? Then we have a next principle called early testing. So early testing is like as soon as you will start the testing, it's going to give you a more bug-free application, right? So testing ideally starts from the time when that developers get the requirement. Like so, as I told you, so in SDLC and STLC, so in both the phases we have a common phase called requirement gathering. Okay, so it's the phase where a developer gets the requirement of your application, a software testing personnel gets the requirement. So ideally the testing starts as soon as you get the requirement, because you start analyzing the application, right? What can be the, okay, there is a module which seems to be more bug prone, something like that, right? So as soon as you will start the testing of your application in as per your software test life cycle, it's going to give you a lot of bug, and the end product would be much better than that whenever you start a late testing, right? Then we have a defect clustering. So defect clustering is it's not like fact, but most of the time, whenever you test your application, so there are maximum chances that there would be a one or two module which are going to get you a maximum bugs, right? So for example, let's suppose I have a ticket reservation application, right? So if you started testing the application, and there are chances that you are going to get a lot of more bug on payment page, because payment page is very dynamic, right? You have to select a mode of payment called credit card or net banking. So there are high chances that you are going to get a maximum bugs in that module only. So for example, I'm testing one application, right? So whenever my developer asks that, okay, so have you tested the application? So I say no, I have not tested the application, but I am sure that this module is going to have a lot of defects. So that comes with the experience, right? So you are testing an application from the past 1 year, then you're pretty much aware that what are the modules which are going to give you maximum bugs. Then we have like next principle as a pesticide paradox. Okay, so pesticide paradox, it's very, do not confuse with the naming convention. So let's suppose, so you must all must have heard about the antibiotics, right? Or you must have heard about the pesticide which we give it to the plant for avoiding it to be insect, right? So we avoid, if we avoid, so we so let's have, we have a plant and we are going to put the insecticide to ensure that no insects is going to so let's take this example of antibiotics, right? So we take the antibiotic to kill the unwanted bacteria of our body, right? So but there is a case, like if you take antibiotics over, right, then there are chances that your bacteria is going to be resistant because of this antibiotic, right? So then it's not going to impact that bacteria and you are going to fail your antibiotics, right? There is no use of taking antibiotics again. So similarly in software testing, so let's suppose you have a module and you have a built some test cases, right? You are running these test cases again and again, then there is no use. Like if you're running the same test cases again and again, then your application is going to be resistant because of these test cases. So to how to deal with it? So as for dealing these scenarios not to occur in your testing phase, you have to check your test case and update it again and again based on the changes in your application, right? So let's suppose I have written one test case for my Facebook application, like I'm clicking on the home page button, so I'm supposed to get the home page of my application, right? So you have written one test case, but there are multiple ways to access that button, right? So first way is that you can directly go to your Facebook home page, you click on, or directly go to some post, you click on a home page, again your home page is appeared with all the updated post on your page, right? But there can be some other way to click that home page. Let's suppose you are inside you are watching some video, right? So there is a again home page button available. So let's suppose you have written a test case for home page to be clicked from the home page button, right? So that is going to, so you have written test case and you are executing it again and again, right? So at one, so let's suppose you got some bug and again you have raised a bug, that bug is fixed, right? Then again, as per next cycle, you are again running the same test case to test that functionality. Then obviously you are not going to get the bug, right? So now you have to update the test case to see how we can, so is there any alternate way to click on the same homepage button? So that's going to help you a lot to make your system bug free. So the intent of this point is always keep like checking your test cases which we have written and update the test cases, right? So then there's a next principle called as testing is context dependent, right? So testing is like, it's a dependent on your module, right? So you have different modules on your application called a payment module, or there is a reservation module in your reservation application system. So it's a context dependent. Like if you have an application called payment systems, so the testing of that module is going to be different than the testing of your login page, right? Because in login page you have to simply click on the like enter the username, enter the password, and click on a submit button, right? But there is a module called payment, so the payment testing is going to be different, right? Because that's something called, you have to check about the use the credit card and debit card for testing, right? So that's a testing is quite context dependent, or quite module or application dependent. Then there is an absence of errors policy, right? So this is something called as if you're not testing any module, right, then that doesn't ensure that that is a bug free, right? So that is something called absence of errors policy. So these are the self-explanatory, and these are the quite theoretical concepts. So if you want more understanding, you can Google like principles of software testing to get more clarity on these principles, right? So again, this is a fundamental test process. So it's the same which I told. It's a software testing life cycle. Okay, so these are the phases like planning and control, analysis and design, implementation and execution, evaluation, exit criteria, and reporting. Then we have a test closure activities, right? So these are the fundamental test process activity which we perform, starting from the starting the testing process till ending the testing process, right? So guys, that's end of the session one. So hope I have clarified most of the points as per this session.